Okay, good morning, everybody, and okay, good morning, everybody. May I just ask one of the editors, can you just confirm that you can hear me and you can see my screen? Let's just give this a minute for one of the editors to confirm.
Oh, can you hear my voice now?
Great. That's yes, I can
Oh,
hear your
great.
voice.
Yeah, great. I thought I had another stupid Linux mic problem. I had my mute button on by default. Okay, maybe it's left over from last session. Okay, so you can hear my voice doesn't sound chopped up or anything?
No, it sounds clear. There's a slight echo, but nothing to complain about. It sounds perfect.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's going good,
it's nice
Robert.
to know. A radically different situation, internet and environmentally. So just in case there's noise, I'll leave my mute off. I'll leave my mute on unless I'm speaking. Great. Okay, so I can see your screen and hear your voice perfectly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I heard another editor speaking in the background while we were speaking, so I think that is two editors. So I, if everybody's happy, I'm going to kick off this week's CIP 52. So firstly, good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Mayer. I'm a project manager at the Cardano Foundation, and I am just going to coordinate the CIP 52 meeting today. This meeting is a delay from last week, as we didn't have a full quorum. However, I believe Robert, Sebastian, and Matthias are all joining us today, which is a great outcome. So thank you very much to the editors for joining. And I won't waste any more time. I will hand over to the editors to begin the meeting today.
So before we start, maybe, and sorry for the late notice, but I just come back from vacation and looking at the agenda, I think the two items under review currently have been reviewed already in the past, and they haven't got any significant updates, I think. So we could probably just leave them there and jump on some more recent CIPs that have been submitted recently, since we have also Sebastian. That's good because he submitted, I think, 2 or 3 of them. So that would maybe be a nice moment to dive into those ones, if everyone agrees.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, let's start with the triage then. And the first is PR number 250, which is adding some Schnorr compatible signature to the Plutus built-in to get some form of Bitcoin support or Bitcoin compatibility support into Cardano, or enable some protocols to move assets from one chain to another through smart contracts. So I think this is pushed by M Labs, but in discussion with Input Output, and in particular with Michael Peyton Jones as well. So I see, yes, Inigo has been commenting on that one for a few bits, but it's still, yeah, still ongoing, I think, draft. I did a very, very surface preview today. and on the surface it looks good. Yeah, what's going on? Okay. So don't have much more comment on that one. I think it's probably good to have for review or last check for next time. Given that the various points are being addressed, we could try to get more maybe buy-in from other parties, because right now it's really done in behind like closed walls between IOG and MLabs. But maybe we could get more people on board on that one.
You had just recently asked Michael to come back into the discussion, and I think that sounds great to just leave it on hold until we hear from him.
Yeah, that was I think the list to do. He has commented in the past and approved the past. I think he has even co-written that, so that's why. But yeah, I guess it's just an ongoing discussions happening for extending Pluto's core, and there is maybe not much to add in the end. Pretty straightforward as well. There was one thing I was missing from the rationale, maybe, because they mentioned they changed a bit the serialization format compared to what Bitcoin uses, which I find interesting or curious. So I will be interested in the rationale why change a serialization format that can create some layer of frustrations between parties integrating after that. If it's nothing really standard, then that's probably not a big issue, but yeah. Okay, so maybe we leave it as last check for the next bi-weekly and see if the discussion settle or not, and perhaps advertise that on a few more channels, or at least it's here. So next one is the dynamic saturation based on pledge. I'm not sure why we've put this one on triage. It's probably a last check item because we've been reviewing that one for a while. And I think the last time we agreed to merge it as proposed, so long as it has also a path to actors, mentioning that the last step was now to get this CIP under the radar of IOG research team and core team to see implementation feasibility or not, a bit like CIP 50 and other of the like. So yeah, this has been added by the author, so I think we can just move forward with that one and merge it as planned.
Yes, it seems like either you or Sebastian would just be able to put it through.
Yup, let me try that. Number 163. Sorry, I have to do that on the phone. Okay. Good. And I will put a note to add it or to modify the README after the call to include that one now. Have no news on that topic from IOG regarding a study group for CIP 50 or CIP 37 and the likes. So I will contact Kevin Hammond again to see. I think IOG is at a workshop this week, so they won't probably be much responsive, but maybe for next week we're gonna get some form of response. Last check also, we have CIP 60, the music token metadata, which we reviewed last time. I think we had a few minor comments which were addressed, as it seems. Okay, yes, we're gonna need to change the tip, sadly. To change the type, sorry. As it's my bad. I suggested to change the type to processes, but it's actually process, I believe. Because there's no typo. But we can probably do it ourselves. As far as I'm concerned, this one is also good to go. Any comments, Sebastian or Robert?
I think since they chose all their metadata items based on meetings that they already had, that part of it seems complete. They also, in the discussion thread, answered some questions about the scope of the proposal. So I really don't see that there's anything else to do with this other than merge it. Is that's already the outcome of their own consensus?
Yeah,
Their media group.
exactly. So it's nice to them to actually put that on paper and record it. And well, I still have reserves regarding CIP 25, but since this one is based on CIP 25, or act as an extension of it. But that's something which is a bit off topic here. So I would approve, but under the condition that we change the processes, the type from processes to process. I think we can do it unless Andrew has prevented commit to his branch. If it did, then I think he would just modify it. That would be fine. And also the status, we need to change it to proposed. What would be the path to active in that one? I guess some of those parties who use the CIP. So if this is already in use, maybe we can even merge it as active right away. I will also have that as a note. I'm just commenting on the branch. Maybe if you want to move to the next one, which is CIP 68.
We don't have any of the CIP 68 participants here today on the guest list, it looks like.
No, they are US based, so unlikely to join today.
They're on the wrong time zone.
Yeah.
So, if everybody's happy, I will leave CIP 68 in the agenda for the US time zone meeting next week.
No, CIP 60.
CIP 60, apologies.
CIP 60, I think we will be able to merge it after the call. Once we have done just the two changes we mentioned. Fix the typo in the type and change the status to either proposed or active, depending on whether or not the CIP is already in use by those various music industry companies. Which is what I'm capturing on the pull request comment. But I was simply suggesting maybe to move to CIP 68 in the meantime.
Okay.
Yeah, keep in mind that for CIP 68, it depends on CIP 67, which had a non-trivial update last week.
CIP 67, the label registry, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So you want to walk us through that a bit, Sebastian?
To be honest, I haven't had the time to read through it all.
Okay. So should we keep then CAP 67 for review for the next biweekly call and CAP 68 in the meantime, because they both goes hand in hands basically? Is that what you're suggesting? Maybe.
Yes, for the USA friendly time zone, that sounds like it would be like it would yield a better discussion.
Yeah, I think CHP 68, it's mostly European folks behind it, but
Yeah, I don't think the US time zone would particularly help for CP68. I've no issues with
Okay.
CP68 as it is. That was my comment last time. Other than, seeing whether or not it gets any adoption is just the main thing. Just left to see. Obviously, CIP 67 had some changes that I'll need to review. But for 68, I had no issue with it.
okay. So, sorry, I've just finished commenting on the previous one. So CHP 68, we'll keep it as review for the next meeting, but with CAP 67 first. Make sure to
Matthias, you're really quiet for me.
what? Sebastian, you said something? Or
Yeah, I'm also struggling to pick up on Sebastian's line.
I was saying Matthias is really quiet for me. Is he quiet for anybody else?
He's not that quiet from my side, no. But Sebastian, your volume and clarity has just improved quite a lot from me.
I've tried to increase my volume maybe a bit, Sebastian.
Okay, way better, way better.
Okay, good. So I was just saying CAP 67 and CAP 68 for review for next time. We'll go through CAP 67. There is, I think, already quite some discussions happening on this one, although it's happening in various places. So yeah, probably they've got enough attention. We don't necessarily need to bring more people into the discussion. Yeah, particularly CAP 68, which has been going over a lot and a lot of chats. Yeah, okay. So I'll keep them for next time then. Let's jump then maybe to the 2CAP you proposed, Sebastian, last week or 2 weeks ago. Since you are here. Oh, a month ago actually. We are quite late. So first one, CAP 38 tentatively. Pull request number 309. Arbitrary script as native scripts pending conditions.
Yes. So basically, the problem we have is that CUDA scripts are not treated the same as native scripts. These are, two different kinds of scripts. The reason they're different is because CUDA scripts require phase 2 validation, whereas native scripts do not. This difference makes it tricky to use CUDA scripts for a variety of reasons. And then on top of that, there's no way to specify datum when you're sending to a PlutoScript, which is totally unrelated. limitation to Plutus scripts. So these two problems, as I mentioned together, make it really hard to basically compose protocols together in Cardano. So for example, if you're using Catalyst and you want the result of the Catalyst vote to be paid out to your DAO address, you can't do it at the moment because you can't specify like a Plutus script as the receiver of the Catalyst rewards. So there's a few ways we can improve the situation. One of them, of course, would be getting rid of the requirement that Plutus scripts have to have datum and allowing some kind of default case. But a different way to handle this, which I think is a lot easier and also has the added benefit of getting rid of this collateral requirement and these phase 2 issues, is to extend the native script functionality. Native scripts on Cardano are how you can do like basic multi-sig, and they have as one of their conditions the ability to say, oh, you need like 3 out of 5 public keys to sign this transaction. What we can do is extend native scripts so you can also have similar conditions on script hashes. So you can say that, oh, for this native script to pass, it needs, for example, 3 to 5 script hashes to be included in this transaction and succeed. So I think this will make it much easier to kind of use native scripts to compose different protocols together without having to introduce new phase 2 validation you have to worry about, and without requiring the presence of a datum.
Okay, I'm not sure to fully understand the motivations behind it, because as far as I mean understood, your main point is when you send to Proto script, you have to send to associate also a datum with it. But surely that datum can just be an empty datum, right? Like a unit.
No, because not every API has a way for you to even easily set the datum, right? For example, if you're sending through data lists, there's no way for you to add the datum in the send page. If you're specifying an address in Catalyst, there's no way for you to tell the Catalyst team, oh yeah, and provide this datum. So there's a lot of cases where you can't easily provide this information.
Yeah, but then that's more a problem of UX than a problem with the protocol itself, right?
Well, so the root problem is that, Plutus requires a datum, and there's not really any protocol need to add this restriction, and it is something that we can remove, and that I think we should remove as a separate CIP. But as you know, changing Plutus behavior is quite a large change in the scope of things, and then even if we take this path of require like getting rid of this default Plutus data and behavior, there is still a difference in functionality between native scripts and Plutus scripts. So I still think even if we had a SIP like this to get rid of this requirement, it would still make sense to provide this kind of composability feature both as a Plutus script feature and as a native script feature.
Okay. I think I will take also the time to go through the CIP because I haven't really been reviewing that one yet. I see it's been mostly commented by IOG folks. What's been the sentiment so far? Seems Michael and Jared.
Yeah, mostly the sentiment has been nobody's particularly objecting to this. People would prefer to spend the time making the Plutus change to get rid of the datum requirements. I think that's definitely something that's worth doing. But I would slightly prefer if we had both options, especially because adding a new feature to native scripts, as we know, is very easy because we've done this in the past. Whereas making a change to Plutus is more involved. And so if we only have that path, it'll also kind of delay the time it takes to add this function onto the protocol.
Yeah. This sounds like two separate concerns in a way. I mean, this would solve one problem, while not necessarily preventing Bluetooth to be also enhanced next to it.
Yep,
Did
exactly. So I like to have both. The discussion of CIP is mostly a question of prioritization, which one should core developers focus on first. But I think that's kind of not really the decision we need to make in the CIP itself. Mostly the CIP is just mostly deciding if this is a good idea that we want.
Okay. Did Jared comment on the impact of extending a native script in that direction regarding the ledger rules and the validation that this would incur?
I don't recall anything that was complicated about this, and I looked through the code myself. And currently, we already have two native scripts versions because, as you remember, at some point we added time locks. So we already have native script v1, native script v2. So it'd just be a question of adding a native script v3 with this proposed change, and it's not a breaking change either.
Hello.
Hey,
Good day, Sebastian and Matthias.
good day to you.
I have a few questions with regards to the CIP. I understand this. I sort of understand the motivation because you have the whole issue with, I understand the whole issue. You have a datum and you can't really specify datum as part of most apps. Both because, that's partly an issue with most apps being bad and part an issue with the UX of Cardano being bad. But I don't understand. I don't think this actually solves the issue because if you have some sort of smart contract, you have a lot of funds, and you're like, well, you have a DAO and everyone votes to send the funds to some DEX, right? And the DEX should send the funds back. Or imagine if it's more automated. You can actually do this even with this native script thing because, like, what return address do you specify when you send the funds to the DAO, not to the DAO, to the DEX? Well, you want a native script return address, but how do you compute that? It's a hash. Doing that on chain is certainly possible, but it's very inefficient. And I don't see how this solves the problem. Actually, I think this is a problem worth solving. I thought about it myself too, but I'm not sure that native scripts are solutions to the problem. Like I thought maybe just adding datums to the address. That's a bit radical. But what do you think about this? Like, how does this solve the problem?
So the key point is that the native script that you're creating can specify a list of scripts that are required, right? And scripts in Cardano don't have to be deployed on chain, right? So if you want to add extra logic, like how to handle returning something or handling an error case or whatever, you can generate what the Plutus script for that will be, take the hash of it, include that hash inside one of the native script requirements, and then use that as your native script address.
Yeah, I don't think this solves the problem actually, though. Because I'll give a more convincing example. Imagine you have some fully automated thing, and I have some, the prototypical state machine. It does something automatically. At one point, it wants to send funds to a DEX, and the fund should go back to some other script, and the datum will depend on the current state of the state machine. Maybe we just want to send the state of the state machine to the new script, actually. And I don't see any way to do this with this mechanism because there is no way of specifying what datum you want to send back to. Like, yes, sure, of course, you can
Yes,
specify
there
a
is.
script.
Yes, there is. Yes,
Oh,
there is. So basically, you create a Pluto script that takes the datum you want to return to as a parameter, not a runtime parameter, but parameter in the construction of the script itself, like a template.
but that doesn't work because you can't check this. Like, you can't check this on chain. Although, if you check this on chain, you have to do bit fiddling. You have to check the content of the script because there's no way to do the parameterization on chain in a fully automated manner and fully trustless manner on chain unless you do the bit fiddling. Of course, that's certainly possible. It doesn't really solve the problem to a satisfactory level, in my opinion.
If you know what you want the return address to be at the time the user is generating the address, then this is not an issue. If you want to compute this dynamically, then you'll need to have some more complex contraption for this. For example, you could have the script associated instead of the native script require a compliant
Exactly.
smart contract, which then triggers something else later, or triggers something else later, and you have to do multiple steps. But I think this is more a question of not being able to do this in one go, and the situation you're describing will require multiple steps of execution. But I don't think that's necessarily problematic.
I mean, you have no problem with necessitating multiple steps, multiple extra transactions to do some sort of wrapping. But in this scenario, it's a very, very minor step forward because there are very few use cases where this is actually useful, where you have a static return address. In almost all DApp interactions, you need to have a dynamic return where there are two issues here. You first of all want to it's like a continuation. You want to send state to the return address in the form of data or something, but you also want the party that sends to the return address. For example, the deck sends funds to some dynamic script that the statement is being specifies. This deck should also be able to specify extra information. And I'm sure you can do that for tokens, actually. So it's not a huge problem. The problem is more so in specifying the return datum. Because this doesn't really solve it, it's a very minor fix. And I mean, sure, you could just add this and be like, okay, we've solved this for one particular use case. But maybe we should think of a more general solution before going ahead with this.
Well, this has everything we need to basically build proxy contracts for layer 2s and side chains, which is the main thing that we want. If you want something more complicated, you'll have to do multiple steps, as we discussed, or you may want to use this other functionality we described, where we allow Plutus scripts with no datum. But the situation we're describing, I don't think it's not possible. It's tedious. It is possible.
It
If
is
you have
nigh
something else,
impossible because of the CPU limit. It's you have to handle as the concept of the script, the serialization of the script on chain, hash it on chain, modify it on chain. Sure, it's possible, but it's not really the way we should go for. What's wrong with just adding the datum to the address? Because the datum is actually part of the address in some sense, like from a semantic perspective. What about just making it part of the address data type once and for all?
you can have a script part of the native script requirement list, and the script as part of the native script requirement list says the next transaction needs to contain a output with this datum as part of it. Like it's not great, I agree. But it's just, if you want to specify like a datum, arbitrary datum, instead of adding this datum to the address itself, you can just encode the requirement of adding this datum as part of the native script that's embedded into the address.
I think yes, but like, what about just adding the datum to the address? Would this solve your problems, or would it not solve your problems if we just add the datum to the address?
It would not solve the problem for our situation. But I can imagine cases where this is sufficient for them.
How would it not solve the case why would it not solve your case? What do you seek to do? Because if you want some data interaction, you just say send to this address and you specify that the data was part of the address, and that data may be just an empty cluster.
So this would solve your issue. I mean, so I guess we would get into the same situation where this would solve our problem if we had multiple steps. So basically, if we did this other option you're proposing where we had the address with the data embedded inside the address, you would first send to a Plutus script, which in our case would then have be a Plutus script that then requires composability with a native script, which is what we're using. So I guess, the solution you're providing solves our solution as long as we're okay with multiple steps as well on our side.
Okay, I think actually I also think of a few other more general solutions. So maybe I'll also write up some thoughts because I think we can maybe do something more advanced even. Because I think there is also the more general problem of parameterization being highly non-trivial on chain. But I think we can actually make a solution where you can parameterize any hash by another hash if we change the serialization format of uses a bit.
Yeah, so I think the solution you're providing falls into kind of the same bucket as the ongoing discussion inside the CIP, which is that there are multiple ways we can deal with composition. Each way has some advantages. The implementation I'm proposing is very simple and solves a certain set of issues. The version you're proposing is also interesting. It solves also some set of issues. There's no reason we can't have both. And so I don't see it as like a detriment to the CIP in any way.
Yeah, maybe it's fine to have both. I mean, the one question didn't actually say if my answer to it says require script. Does that mean it can be anywhere in the script context? Like can it be a stake validator, a mini policy, a validator? Can it be anything, or does it have to be something specific?
Yeah, that's a good point. We might want to add an extra functionality for you to be able to assert more about where the script hash is. I'm not sure if we want to go that far because I feel like this kind of goes down a rabbit hole of adding too much functionality to what it's meant to be fairly simple. So I would say it's just any script that's part of the
I mean, that's
transaction.
fine. I think that's fine. My concerns are over. I think this CIP is a step forward, and it might still be useful. But I think we should also think of a more general solution for more advanced use cases.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should definitely increase composability in multiple different ways to handle multiple situations.
Great, thank you.
And on a related note, we have a second CIP that's also proposed by me that's also partially related to this one and partially related to the discussion we just had, which is CIP 39 for language annotated addresses, which basically says that right now addresses in Cardano you can't tell the difference between a native script and a Plutus script, but CIP 39 tries to set a standard for being able to differentiate between script kinds. There's two ways that can be implemented. It can be implemented as a purely off-chain construct, and the blockchain itself has no knowledge of this difference. Or we could go all the way and implement this as a on-chain construct. The discussion inside the CIP is mostly people talking about how they prefer to have this as an on-chain construct, but there is no clear way to make this an on-chain construct that really works for everybody. And so that's kind of the summary of this discussion.
So are you proposing to extend the address type to have new types that can now carry a script namespace?
Yeah, that's the basic idea. So basically, we extend the existing address format on Cardano to annotate them to include the script type used inside the address. But as you know, the addresses are parsed by wallets and these things, not necessarily on chain. And so you could have the wallet take an address, use it to assert the script type, and then strip the script type information, submit that off chain, or should I submit that part on chain. So that's how you implement the CIP without actually making any changes to the blockchain itself, which I think is more likely to be the first implementation, because trying to change the on-chain format of addresses is one, complicated, and two, there's not really a good way to have the chain really enforce script types.
Yeah, but this is kind of the nature of my questions, because you have two options also regarding your address. You can either modify the existing types or add new types that will include the scripts, which means that you will still have the ability to use the old address type that does not include the script namespace. So I mean, I think this makes it slightly easier to implement in a non-breaking manner.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is discussed in the CIP. So basically, there's two ways. There's one way of allocating new types, like the actual numbers, and the other way is to extend the existing types. We can extend the existing types without introducing like a new number in the header, and this will work except for pointer addresses. The reason why is because if you change the existing types, you can differentiate between based on the length of the address. If it's one length, it's one standard. If it's another length, it's a different standard. This doesn't work for pointer addresses because they have a undefined length. So there's not really a good way to parse them.
Maybe there is a CIP to make here to suggest the removal of pointer addresses, since I think we are amongst the two individuals that have been using them on the chain. The only two. So yeah, that will simplify a bit things. Okay, should we get that CIP for review next week? Is the discussion still ongoing, or I see it mostly happened months ago, but no
No, I
updates since then?
don't think there's any ongoing discussion anymore. I think everybody has said their thoughts on the proposed path. I don't think I think some of the stuff has not been like decided. Like, for this CIP 39, the language annotated addresses, Michael Payne Jones and Jared wanted to try and figure out how we can make this an on-chain construct that is actually validated by the blockchain itself. But then you need some way for the blockchain to know ahead of time, or whether or not an address is a native script or a Plutus script. Or the other option is that you don't validate this ahead of time, but then if somebody sends to the wrong script type, they can never spend from it, which is also not great. So
It could be done fully optionally, right? So if you specify a type and you provide the script part of the transaction, then the ledger validates it. And if it doesn't validate, then it fails. So as a client, you have a way to sort of enforce that there is a ledger validation on top. But if you don't provide it, then yes, the ledger has no way to validate it, and it's just blindly accepted like it does now.
Yeah, and the question is whether or not this validation should happen when you send to the address or when you send from the address.
Well, I would say if you can do it when you send to the address, that's where the interest is at this stage, because
Yeah,
that's
that was
where bad thing can happen right now.
Yeah, that was my preference as well. Michael Payne Jones preferred to do the validation when you spend from the address.
But when you spend from it, you can always do it because you have the script at this stage. But then what happened? If you have sent to an address which has a mismatch between the type and the actual script, you're just locked forever.
Yep,
That
that's
sounds
Michael Payne Jones' suggestion.
okay. That's an interesting suggestion.
Yeah, I prefer to avoid people accidentally potentially locking funds forever, if possible, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of that proposal. But also, I understand that the chance that you get this wrong, that you send to the wrong script type, is also fairly small. So it's not the biggest concern. I think that's the figuring out like the which validation rule we take if we make this an on-chain construct is the main thing that needs to be decided. Um, so if we're in disagreement about the best way to do it, we may want to. But if we're in disagreement about the way we want to do the validation, but we're in agreement on the binary format of this, then we can just make this CIP be the off-chain standard only, and then have another discussion about how to do any on-chain validation in the future.
I don't quite see the benefits of doing on-chain validation after the fact, to be honest, because this is really a feature to prevent people from shooting themselves in the foot. And now we are just giving them one more way of doing that if we do the validation after the fact. So if it's purely informative for wallets and applications downstream to be able to identify whether or not a certain assets is locked behind a Pluto script or native script, then I don't see what validations would add on top.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
So okay, maybe to move that AP forward then is to also decide on how you want to implement that between the off chain or on chain, and perhaps it can start, as you said, off chain, having wallets already recognizing that format, using it, but sweeping the parts when actually submitting things on chain. I think that will be quite hard to get adoption across the entire ecosystem in a way, because now you will also get some discrepancy, right? Some wallets will show an address, and an explorer might show a slightly different address, which might be very confusing for people. So my own preference would be to have that enforced on chain fully, even if there is no validation or extra validation done yet on top of it. That wouldn't be worse than the current status quo, and then we can take a bit more time to think about how we want to validate that, if we want to validate that. That's my thoughts. Yeah. Regarding implementability of that CIP, did you discuss that with Jared also on the PR?
Nothing beyond validation rules.
Okay. Because I imagine if it's just adding new addresses, it should be pretty straightforward implementation wise, sorry, as it's just a extending an existing sum type basically. And yeah, it doesn't introduce new validation logic in that sense. It's just a script address, but that carries some additional information with it. But yeah, that would be to discuss. I will make a more formal review also after the call, adding some comments on it itself. And let's see, let's have it for either review or review for next bi-weekly. See if we can get more insights from also the core team as for, is this implementable, and yeah, what's the plan with that. Okay, so I would say we have about 10 minutes left, so that gives us a bit of time to go through maybe CIP 50 and some updates on the discussions there. I haven't been following the latest items on that, so I'm not sure if any of the editor has. Robert, maybe.
I'm not getting any audio from Robert. Is it just me?
Yes, I do hear you, Robert, but I think Anthony doesn't.
Apologies.
That was hoped for, because it's been up for so long, it's become a magnet for proposals that are similar, so that are coming in and out of the CIP 50 thread. So there has been commentary, but not really about CIP 50 itself.
I think it was a bit the goal of CIP 50 also, to become the hive mind, as Michael calls it, right? To
Yes.
welcome discussions on incentives, rewards, and how to do better with an initial proposal, but not necessarily the finite proposal being CIP 50. Or I mean, it will be eventually, but it might be vastly different from what was initially submitted. I think that was kind of the idea.
Yes. And one of those that we just recently merged without the meeting was sort of a really quick and dirty way of dealing with the problem, just by a linear relationship between pledge and saturation. Something that would work for some centralization cases but allow others. So I think we're still looking for something that is going to deal with the Sybil attack problem and the centralization problem all in a nutshell. And it's a bit like the grand unified field theory, you know. Everyone has an idea to how to tackle a different part of it, but it's hard to put the whole thing together. So as since the author is a scientifically rigorous person, I'm not. It seems to be, yeah, like it seems to be a theory that is hasn't promoted any particular practical application yet. People are still talking about different ways of doing it.
Also, new participants in the discussions recently, which is interesting. Okay, so I guess we'll also need to go through a bit of the discussion that happened on GitHub and also Discord. Try to make a summary for next time and see. And as I
Are you
said
going to?
earlier in the call today, I need to reach out again to Kevin Hammond from IOG to see if we can get any more attention from IOG researchers. So would be very nice to get more collaboration on that, and kind of an ongoing effort with milestones and actually actionable items a bit. I guess Vasil is now planned to be rolled out for September 22nd, so that kind of topic should be next on the pipeline, hopefully. Okay, I think it's a good time to wrap up, maybe. So I will try to do that. Let me pull back the agenda. So yes, we've been through CIP 49, candidate CIP, which is adding 2 new primitives to Bluetooth to verify Schnorr and ECDSA signatures, which would bring some form of Bitcoin compatibility into Cardano. It's been mostly discussed by IOG and MLabs. It's it's in good shape, so we'll have it next time for review and last check. Then we've finally merged CIP 37 as proposed, although this is a CIP that falls in the same category as CIP 50, discussing reward and incentives. For Cardano, it has different pros and cons, as discussed also in CIP 50. So this was more a way to put a closure on that discussion on CIP 37 to also move it more to the more general CIP 50 discussion. Then we've had a last look at CIP 60 for the music token metadata, which was already reviewed, discussed, and it was really just a last sanity check. We agreed to merge it so long as we fix the typo in the type and change the status to either proposed or active, depending on whether or not industry members are already using it extensively. We've postponed the discussion on CIP 68 because it needs to go hand in hand with CIP 67, and we haven't really got enough time to go through that CIP 67 recent update. So we'll have both as review for next week. Sorry, for the next meeting, I mean. So we have discarded CIP 45 and CIP 66 from the discussion, from the agenda today. I mean, because there have not been any substantial updates since last time we discussed them. And we instead looked at CIP 38 and CIP 39, which sparked an interesting discussions during the meeting, and specifically on how do we maybe improve a bit the overall UX surrounding scripts on Cardano. And in particular, how do we prevent users from shooting themselves in the foot when sending to script addresses? So CIP 38 proposed one way to sort of alleviate some of the problems or some of the difficulty that there is currently with the usage of Bluetooth scripts and datums. And the discussion was now to move forward. We want to make actually a decision on how we want to enforce that on chain or off chain. On chain meaning that this requires some buy-in also from the core teams to implement. And CIP 39, which is more on the side of addresses and how do we improve address. Sorry, I mixed them both. So on-chain versus off-chain discussions is on CIP 39, and sorry, so CIP 38 was about the extension of the native script to introduce validation of Bluetooth script as an extra constraint, possibly many, if combined with the existing primitives of the native scripts. I think that was it. So thank you all for joining, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Just a short note, Matthias, in conclusion, that the next CIP is to take place next week, just because this was a delayed CIP.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, no, just to
Next
clarify.
week then.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.